Hi, you're watching Doug McKinlay for Doug McKinlay Photography. Now, I did indeed make it. I'm here in the Rift Valley in Kenya after a good 9.5 hours plus flight down from London, and then a little puddle jumper for about another 1.5 hours to our destination. Now, we've hit the ground running. We've already seen some elephant, lots of giraffes, some antelope, and of course a couple of lions. And this is just the beginning. So we're having lunch here by the river, after which we'll do a small game drive again, head back to our lodge, and get some much needed sleep. Conservation is one of our planet's most pressing problems, and in Africa, no other animal has come to represent that plight better than the black rhino. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm on assignment to write and photograph a magazine feature on the black rhino and how its conservation affects all wildlife. How the fight to save one species spills over into the ecosystem as a whole. Even though my primary focus while here in Kenya is the black rhino, it's not the only species in jeopardy. So, the way I see it is, if I can also highlight some of the travails of other animals, that can only be a good thing. So I've come to near the end of the day, and we spent the first day out amongst the prairie, I suppose, the savanna of the Great Rift Valley, and it's been amazing. We've seen lots of wildlife, elephants, giraffe, little dik-diks, lots of bird life, different kinds of impala, an ostrich. So it's been quite successful. Photographically, it's been good. I've only got this 300mm lens with me, it's 300 f4, nothing really super long. But as I suspected, the guides are brilliant. So they're getting me within range where I can get some reasonably tight pictures with that 300mm. So it's about 5 o'clock in the afternoon at the moment, and the sun is starting to sink toward the horizon. And in this part of the world, it gets dark pretty quick, 6 o'clock, and boom, it's gone. So, but in Africa, there's a tradition called the sundowner. So in about half an hour or so, 40 minutes or so, the guides are going to pick myself up and my colleague who's with me, and we're going to a nice lookout spot and have a sundowner, which is a traditional African drink. Well, this is our second day of our trip into the African bush, and this morning my colleague Andrew and I are sitting in a hide outside a watering hole with the hope of seeing some wildlife. Now, one thing about photography, especially with wildlife photography, is there's absolutely no guarantees. So we could sit here for a couple hours and see nothing, but you know, it doesn't matter. It's really interesting anyhow. It's one of those exercises in patience that if you have the patience, you could be rewarded, or we could be going back to the lodge just for another cup of coffee. Now today we move on, and today will be the first day of our rhino tracking, and the camp is called Saruni Rhino. Now it's about a 2-hour drive from where we are at the moment, through some of the most bone-shaking, hip-crunching roads you'll ever go on. But nonetheless, it's still really worth doing. There's lots of visuals, and I'm sure along that route we'll find some more wildlife to look at and take some pictures of. Andrew and I spent 2 hours in that hide with little to show for it except some bird sightings. At this point, I'm acutely aware of the pressure of my commission and how little time I have to do it all. It was time to pack up all our gear, grab our 2 colleagues, and make our way across country to the Serene Rhino Lodge for the main event of my story. If there's one thing I've learned about completing commissions over the years, is that if something can go wrong, it will. There's always a little bit of Murphy's Law that seeps in, and this job is no different. So we're on our first day of rhino tracking, and of course it's all gone wrong. Now we've had a technical problem where the radio collared rhino can't be found because the radio collar equipment isn't working. But that's part and parcel of doing these kind of gigs. So tomorrow we got a second chance, and I know we'll get it fixed and we'll see the rhinos. Today is the day, our final chance to see and document the black rhino in its natural habitat. I've been awake for a while now in anticipation, just listening to the morning chorus of birds and watching the trees in the distance light up with the sun. But before going back to the Rhino Conservancy this afternoon, we have the opportunity to visit the Reteti Elephant Sanctuary in the Reteti Mountains, about 2 hours from here. That should be interesting too. So we spent the first part of the morning, about 2 hours, driving from our lodge toward the Reteti Elephant Sanctuary. Now we've arrived here and they've got a number of baby elephants and yearlings and 2-year-old elephants that have been abandoned or they've been the result of poaching. But at the same time, they also take in rhinos as well, who are in distress. And even though we got skunked last night in the bush looking for the wild rhinos, at least they have one here on premises that we can have a look at, take some pictures of, and get some information on how the conservation process is working in this part of Africa. So I've just returned from the Reteti Elephant Sanctuary in the Reteti Mountains. It's about a 2-hour drive from here on some really, really rough roads, lots of potholes and bumps and bruises, and you've got to be careful your equipment doesn't get chucked out the side, so hands on all the time. But it's an interesting sanctuary. They take in a lot of elephants that have been either abandoned or the mothers have been poached, they're sick, that kind of thing. But they do take rhino as well. And whilst we're there, they had a year-old black rhino in residence, and which was interesting to watch them, how they feed it, how it's getting on with its health, etc. And when it gets to a certain size and age, they will try to release it into the wild again. It's an interesting place in the sense that they won't let me take pictures in their kitchens because they have this almost like a copyright on the feeding program of their animals, and they don't want others to see it. Part of this job too is I'm working with 2 or 3 other journalists and who aren't photographers, and so therefore their needs are a little different from mine. So on that rough road, and other rough roads, I can't just say to the driver stop so I can get an image of something, because I have to keep their needs in mind as well. So it's a bit of a balancing act. The other thing that's tough is that we're going really hard, up at 5 o'clock in the morning and out right away, and maybe getting a little break in the afternoon and out again. So tiredness is starting to show itself, and that means that I've got to be very wary of not making mistakes. And I've made a few, of course, because the tiredness really does get to you, so you've got to be careful. I double check all my settings before I start working. I'm really aware of my surroundings. I'm hyper aware of my surroundings because I'm always thinking I'm going to miss something because I'm so tired. Now today, and about 2 hours from now, after lunch, we're going to head back out to the Black Rhino Conservancy, where hopefully we'll see some of the animals in the wild. We need to. It's really important for me. Yesterday, as I said earlier, the tracking equipment failed to work for us, but I've been assured that it's all been fixed, and this afternoon we should get those images that could really make this piece sing. My colleagues and I are only here for a few days. Next week I'll be back in London and on to the next job. But that's not the case of the Samburu of the Serra Community Conservancy. They're here for the long haul. They've always been here for the long haul. If it wasn't for tribes like the Samburu looking ahead and seeing the positives, both economic and social, of conservation, then the future of Kenya's wildlife would be pretty bleak indeed. The Northern Rangelands Trust, a body dedicated to working with tribal communities, including the Samburu, works tirelessly to convince tribal people that their wildlife is much more valuable to them alive than dead. Wildlife attracts a sustainable tourism sector, which trickles down to all parts of the local economy, including education and jobs. Ultimately, the conservation and protection of the wildlife in the NRT is in the hands of groups like the Samburu, and for what I've witnessed, they are very capable hands indeed. No one knows these lands better than the locals, and no one other than the locals will help maintain long-term stability. This whole story's been about the rhino. 2 days ago, when we were out tracking them, we couldn't find them. We had a problem with the radio receiver. But not late yesterday afternoon. It all came together. We'd spend another couple hours in the bush, walking as stealthily and quietly as possible, trying not to scare anything off, when our guides did indeed come across a big female with a juvenile. However, she was in a really heavy thicket and wasn't moving. She was lying down. You could barely see her. And after about an hour and a half, we were thinking, oh man, she's not going to get up. And I was thinking we should maybe pack up and go away and try again the next day. But this is where that whole patience and perseverance thing comes in as a photographer. Just as I was thinking, okay, it's not going to work, she got up, walked through the bush into a nice big clearing and got within 10 meters of me. I couldn't have asked for anything else. Got some great images and I was very happy with the results. Overall, I think I've got enough stuff for the story. I'm hoping the editors will think so too, so it's been a really good trip. So thanks for watching. I'm Doug McKinlay for Doug McKinlay Photography. Can you play the violin so I can sing the story of my ancestors? Amadu Bamba no belly tuba, Amadu Bamba. Alagi Maliksi no belly tiwawan. Bukutanjai no belly injasan. Mamli Mamulai no wali dakari of life. Bubakar Aidara no wali Sanjabai. Cherno Ibrahim Marsa sum no belly Mandina. Andu gore mada. Iye mi wala ma ko wani mada.